have been thinking a lot about priorities and about school this past week, and I was reminded of one of my first classes when I was in college, and humorously enough, I got lost on campus trying to find it, had to stop at the campus police and ask where this building was, because nobody I asked knew. Even upperclassmen had no idea where this building was. And so after wandering around and panicking that I was going to be late, I finally arrived at class. And I just remember the sense of anticipation that I had, brand new semester, brand new college, just what wisdom was this professor going to impart. And he was a fantastic man of wisdom. His name was Dr. Kemp, and he comes in and he began to talk to us about ministry. The class was called Introduction to Ministry, so it was no surprise. But what he shared thereafter really kind of is something that I've gone back to time and time again, and I think that it applies for everyone, not just ministers. But he walked up to the board and he asked us, what are your priorities? And he said, what would you list, And so in my mind, I was like, well, I want to pass school, I want to get a job, I'm kind of listing these things out in my head. And so he said, at the center should be your top priority. So, I'm listing it out. And then he said, how many of you put God at the center? And I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't. He said, in the center of our priorities should be God. He said everything else should start with God. And then from there, we should have things like family. He said, our family should always come next. And then the next important thing should be maybe work, if you work outside the home. Or it could be, just maybe extended family, and just go from there. And he said, but at that core, at the core of who you are, should always be God. But if we're honest, it doesn't always happen like that. The other day I was talking to my mom, and we were talking about my struggle is to do this. And this is sometimes in my life where my priorities begin to hit. It's work, then God, then family. Or sometimes, I'm even more ashamed to admit that that God falls somewhere out here. Now, I'm not talking what I say in words, I'm talking about what I do in deeds, how I act and how I live my life. Unfortunately, does not always reflect the priorities that it should have. And so my life begins to come out of skew. And he says, when we put the wrong thing in priority in our family, in our lives, what happens is we don't have anything grounding us. We begin to have the wrong focus, and we begin to struggle. And so he just gave us a charge that first day to make sure that our priorities were in the right space. Matthew 6:19 says, don't lay up for yourself treasures on earth where moths and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. There's only one thing in this world that's eternal, and that's God and your relationship with him. We are not we're not on the same level of God. Even as Christians, we have a beginning point. God has no beginning and no end. He is truly always there. And I don't know about you, but I want my treasure to be an eternal treasure. But what that means is that everything else passes away. My work passes away. Of course, my money, what I have passes away. My education, my claim, my friends, my family even pass away. As hard as it is sometimes for me to struggle through that, one of these days my family will no longer be here. That's the truth of the matter. I'm not promised tomorrow with anyone, and they're not promised tomorrow with me. So my beautiful nieces and nephew, their time is in God's hand. And as much as I love them, I can't place them in a priority that the eternal and omniscient and omnipresent and holy God belongs in. They can't be the center of my world. They can't be my number one priority. Work cannot be the center of my world. I don't have a husband, so I don't really have to worry about putting him there. But if I did, my husband could not be the center of my world. My boyfriend could not be the center of my world. You see where I'm going? The list goes on of what can't be the center of my world. Because there's only one thing that is eternal. And there's only one thing that lasts, and that's God. And so God must be the center of everything that we say and do. And like I said, that's not always been true for me. It's not always been something that I've done. But it's something that reminds me. That day that Dr. Kemp shared that lesson with me has become a day I won't forget, because the Lord uses it to remind me of where are my priorities. What am I putting at the center of my world? What am I putting at the top of my list? And so I sometimes have to rearrange those priorities. And my prayer for you, each of you, is that you put God at the center, that He's the number one in your world. That yes, all of these other things are important, and they definitely make the list, that God remains number one, and that you live like that.